Hi, if you think that you know all Windows games from 2001, let me surprise you. I'm sure that at least about few of these you've never heard about. Well, let's check them out. Oni Onai Onai, or however else it's called, is a sci-fi third-person perspective shooter brawler. I know, sounds like a weird mix, but it actually works. You play as Konoko, a genetically enhanced special agent working for the law enforcement organization known as TCTF, so a Technology Crimes Task Force, and a character clearly inspired by the Ghost in the Shell anime main protagonist. So she looks, moves and acts similarly, and you know what? It's fantastic. The little comments that she makes during combat are pretty fun too. Konoko has quite a wide set of fun and acrobatic martial arts attacks available, and they are all very show-offy. So she does all those different cartwheels, jumps and other gymnastic moves I could never name while kicking butts and breaking bones, sometimes both at the same time, and it's a pleasure to watch. Not the violence, the grace of it all. Most importantly though, it's an even bigger pleasure to perform all of these moves. As you go through the story, new additional attacks are unlocked, so you always feel like there's some kind of a small reward waiting for you in the next half an hour or so to incentivize you to carry on playing. Konoko can also pick up and use various weapons, and they use either ballistic or energy ammo. And since that ammo is rather limited, you're more likely than not to find yourself using your martial arts for the most time. It's really not an issue though, as the hand-to-hand combat is actually pretty darn cool and easily the most fun part of the game. If you're ever facing a particularly difficult challenge, you can always use your hypo spray, so normally healing items, but when at full health, they override Konoko's natural abilities, giving them a considerable boost in both speed and damage. Oni is set in 2032, when a singular centralized government known as World Coalition Government, or WCG, rules over 80% of all countries and is in the process of actively taking over the rest. The creation of WCG was explained with a need to help poorer nations and to bring equality to the world. In reality, as always, poor remained poor, or got poorer even, and rich cemented their status permanently. So I would define that WCG abbreviation as the world cocked greatly, as in given an unsolicited dick pic treatment. Also, I fear that such is the future of our world too. Fresh out of the Technology Crimes Task Force Academy, Konoko is paired up with an android Shinatama and sent to deal with the Syndicate, a criminal organization ruled with an iron fist by the man known only as Boss Muro. Cool name. Now, while the game starts on that note, given that Konoko knows literally nothing about her past other than that she was orphaned and raised under the watchful eye of TCTF, you will soon encounter story bits and pieces that will tell you more about her past and also help you shape her future. Oni is perhaps not the deepest game when it comes to its plot. I mean, it's not bad, don't get me wrong, not what I'm saying here whatsoever, you will like it, it's just not very ambitious. But the way the combat is implemented and the gameplay overall feels, Oni is definitely a game worth checking out. Also, anime-inspired protagonist, so you know, if you're into it, there were really no better similar games in 2001. New York Race, or NYR, looks as if it was based on Luc Besson's The Fifth Element, the taxi chase scene in it to be precise, and it's naturally a sci-fi racer. And while perhaps it's not on the same level as let's say Wipeouts or even more down-to-earth racers like the Need for Speed, it's still a pretty fun little game to fire off once in a while just to feel how it would be to chase around these futuristic streets at ungodly speeds. I mean, way above the streets, with all the surrounding neo-modern buildings turning into a blur of colors. The game comes with 30 different vehicles, 2 of them being variations of the iconic flying taxi and a police car scene in the movie, and 12 tracks, unlockable by advancing through levels and split into 4 thematically unique districts of Jet Set, Middle Class, City District and Chinatown. There are 4 game modes available in NYR, and it's Championship, Single Race, Time Attack and Kyrene mode. The middle 2 are self-explanatory I hope, so I'm gonna skip them all together, but the other 2 I'll try to cover briefly. Championship is what you expect it to be, so a series of racers, and it's split into 4 categories of qualification, beginner, pro and expert. In all fairness, these work more like difficulty levels really, but you can go through them bottom to top to familiarize yourself with the controls and grow in challenge if you're someone who doesn't play racers a lot. Kyrene mode is probably the most fun of them all if you just want to jump in and have a quick racing session. It's a race through checkpoints at which the last place contestant is always eliminated until there's only one of all the drivers left. Well, racers, there's hardly any driving in the game. There are 4 bonus pickups in NYR that you get to collect while racing, and they're based on the elements, so water, fire, earth and air. Water leaves a hovering sphere of liquid behind, slowing down the opponents unlucky enough to fly into it. Fire allows you to shoot homing fireballs, which you know is always helpful. Earth gives you a temporary shield to counter other racers' fireballs, and Air is just a speed boost. Or a speed boost, I should say, really, as it can actually win you a game. New York Race is definitely not the best game in its genre, but it's a fun title for short bursts from time to time. Throne of Darkness is very weird. I mean, not the story of it, the story is, well, out there, but it's just mechanically odd, and to the point that I consider it both a good and a bad game at the same time. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. It's a top-down isometric action role-playing, a bit similar in gameplay to the giant of the industry, Diablo, but set in the Middle Ages Japan, and with you controlling numerous warriors instead of a single hero. I mean, you have few of them available at all times, but can only lead up to 4 at once into action, and only one of them is controlled directly. The other 3 are led by the CPU, and while you can fiddle with a simple AI routines to have them do what you'd like, it's still a bit finicky and rather spotty in its execution system. Each of the warriors that you lead into battles is a bit different and fighting in his own style. So there's the Brick, a power warrior, and he's joined by the Archer, Swordsman, Wizard, Ninja, Berserker, Master of the Polearms, and Unarmed Combat Specialist. It's not Throne of Darkness, but a balancing act, that's the name of the game here. Meaning that you have to smartly rotate all your combatants to always be able to have the best team at hand for all the challenges that you'll be facing. It is something that may catch you by surprise at first, but also something that you'll get used to fast too. Items have durability, so they will need to be periodically repaired or replaced. And the repairs are made at a blacksmith, who can also create magic items for you if you provide him with magic artifacts and a lot of money. And by a lot, I mean a lot. So much of it, in fact, that any sense of using this of his services becomes questionable. And especially that it takes time too. Again, a lot of it. I mean, while the timing aspect of it could be overlooked, the one correlating to gold can't. Why? Well, you only get it from defeated foes and they drop very little. You can't sell unnecessary items, and to make things worse, each of your warriors has their own stash, so you constantly have to move gold between them if you want to buy something. It's just bad game design. Daimyo menu is quite useful, allowing you to replenish health and slash or resurrect fallen warriors. It all costs ki, but ki replenishes automatically. That said, it does so at such a snail pace that despite the usefulness of Daimyo's services, it's still rather annoying. The last person that you can ask for help is the priest, who can identify unknown items, purify cursed ones, and trade your unwanted gear for spell knowledge. Which, you know, is useful, but not as useful as even the most basic shop that would allow you to sell items for gold would be. Fortunately, while a bit odd feeling, combat and overall gameplay loop are pretty nice, and having to mow down some bodies with your group of hardy warriors is quite fun. Sure, Throne of Darkness is nowhere near as deep as Diablo, and that's a sentence I never expected to hear myself say aloud, but to fire it up once in a while and complete a few quests, it does the job well. Story-wise, Zanshin is commanding an army of mostly skeletons and zombies, laying destruction to once beautiful and peaceful land of Yamato. So now you and your merry band of braves have to stop him. Do you remember Scorched Earth that I told you about in one of the videos covering 10 years of DOS gaming? Specifically one from 1991? Well, Scorched 3D is a free remake of that game. And for the most part, it's the same title, but 3D and with some new gameplay ideas. So, once again the combat takes place on the arena, this time represented by a singular island somewhere in the middle of an ocean. And a number of players are pitted against each other trying to destroy all the opponents before they destroy themselves. Scorched 3D features 2 game modes, Single and Apocalypse. The first is traditional and turn-based, and all the players take their turns, each of them being able to take one shot within the allotted time. If you've played the original, this is the exact same mode, but in 3D. Apocalypse, however, is more of an all-out, no-limits kind of a game, and it allows all players to shoot at once without any limits, and it all happens in real time. Now, what kind of crazy and chaotic game are you telling me about, you may wonder? Well, believe it or not only it makes the game faster, but also more fun. And the more the players, be it real ones or bots, the more fun it is. I know, it's a far cry from the classic, in which you had all the time in the world to aim your shots, but trust me, if you get used to it, give it a few games or so, you'll learn to love it. The battles last until one of the players accumulates a certain number of points or until he or she is the last one standing. Well, the last one driving, as it's all about vehicular combat. And in Scorched 3D, there are over 300 different ones to choose from. And if I can suggest something, if you'll be playing the game with others, go for the ones that take up the least space. You'll be a harder target to reach. The weapons naturally come in dozens and you can get lost in the selection, but since some of them are kinda pricey, you may have to save up some money earned in battles before being able to get them. Arguably, Scorched 3D's kind of a gameplay loop does not have a lot of longevity in a single-player versus bots games only, as it can get old quite fast, and the CPU is never as creative and unpredictable as a person can be. But in a group of friends, it's a blast. And I know that I've mentioned it already, but I would like to highlight it here once more. Scorched 3D is entirely free, so if you're someone who's careful what you spend your money on, it's a deal like no other. While Diggles may sound like something that should come from an urban dictionary and describe balls, as in your testicles if you have them, the game has nothing to do with the anatomy, human or otherwise. There may be a story behind Diggles, and we'll get to that later, but what you really need to do in it is manage your tribe of dwarfs, build up and expand on their underground town and structures in it, and make sure to keep them happy. In fact, in most cases you can focus on just that and wait for something of note to happen and direct your attention to a particular task or thing to achieve. All of your Diggles have their own inventories and all of them can be equipped with weapons too. Why would they need them, you may wonder, after all I've not mentioned anything about the enemies? Well, I do now. And when two opposing units meet, they fight it out, and like in some of those best action movies no less, so until there's only one of them left. You can assign your Diggles to particular shifts that they'll work at and even send them to perform specific tasks. Keep in mind, however, that you just never have enough of them, and scheduling too many of these may result with some of your Diggles abandoning what they currently do and running off to do that new thing. Erecting buildings requires resources and delivering them to the building site, which can be done by hand, but I wouldn't recommend that. Because as long as the necessary stuff is within the view range of any of your Diggles, it will be automatically collected by them and delivered to where it's supposed to be used. All that said, Diggles are no settlers, I'm afraid, so they can't work infinitely without rest. In fact, they will not only require rest, but also entertainment, food, and if you wanna have more of them, sex too. I mean, procreation. They don't do it for fun after all, they do it for the community. Yay! Either way, making sure to provide them all that, so cooked food, something to drink and a cozy place to meet up and do the nasty, is on top of your to-do list. Interestingly enough, the kids that come out from these Diggle unions inherit some of the traits from their parents, which is always fun. The aforementioned shifts are there to make sure that each of the Diggles will have some time off for themselves to ponder about the reasons of their existence and the predicament of being led by an invisible and omnipresent superior being, you. All of your dwarfs are described by the attributes which are raised through their actions, meaning that in time they may specialize themselves in particular workloads, so it's good to keep an eye on that and make sure to direct them to what they're best at. Sadly, Diggles is a waiting game. Yep, another one of those, I'm afraid. So you tell your dwarfs to do something and wait. Then when it's done, because you're naturally careful not to have too many tasks for them to work on, you assign them to new ones and wait some more. Fortunately, the game makes sure to give you something to do in between. Yes, it's sarcasm. Because other than being a waiting game, it's also a micromanagement hell, in which you need to tick off hundreds of points on your constantly changing virtual lists of tasks. You gotta make sure that the Diggles have food, that they're happy and not tired, that what you told them to do is actually done, that their inventories are not full, if they are working at all, if the shifts are set up in the most effective way, and whether you even have enough resources for what you plan on. Yeah, don't get me wrong, Diggles is fun, but it's also a lot of busy work and waiting, and it's not a loop for everyone. Now for the story on your quote-unquote ultimate goal of the game. Brace yourselves, as it's gonna be a breeze. Fenris, the fiery hound belonging to Odin, ran off into the underworld, and being the lazy sod that Odin is, he delegates the task of finding Fenris to your tribe. See, told you it's gonna be a fast one. Alone in the Dark: The New Nightmare is the fourth installment in the series of survival horror games. And while I don't wanna commit a video gaming sin here, I have to admit that I kinda feel that it may be the best of them all. Why, you may wonder? Cause it's genuinely scary, and I never really thought the first three were in the slightest. Perhaps because of their graphics, perhaps because of something else, it's irrelevant today. Alone in the Dark: The New Nightmare is very dark, eerie and atmospheric, and you constantly feel as if something is lurking at you from behind each and every corner, waiting for you to look away, to jump at you when you least expect it, and give you an unpleasant case of bad trousers. You know, trousers that have to be changed right then and there, and for no reason at all. But still, like pronto. And you need a shower too, but that's not really unrelated. So you have a flashlight to cut through all the pitch black that's everywhere, but if I'm to be honest, all that it does is just magnifies the effect of all the jump scares. I mean, I suppose that's good, since it's a horror game, but you know, why give me something and tell me it will help, when in fact all it does is work against me. Perhaps mentally only, but it still does. Alone in the Dark: The New Nightmare is still the same game as the earlier ones were, so you're moving about using tank controls, solve numerous puzzles and engage in combat, usually while having a very limited ammo. The backgrounds are largely static, and all interactive objects, items and characters are rendered in real time on top of them. I wouldn't go as far as saying that the new Nightmare is as good as Resident Evil games, but it's pretty damn close. And that's not nothing. You're once again playing as Edward Carnby, a protagonist of most Alone in the Dark games, and you're flying towards the menacingly named Shadow Island to investigate the death of your friend, Charles Fiske. You're not alone though, and Aline Sedrak, who's an expert on uncanny tabloids, is there with you. These tabloids are known to be on the island in large numbers, and you have a sneaky feeling that their presence may be in a dark and mysterious way helpful in explaining the deadly tragedy. What you don't know though is that Aline's tagging along is not only to help you, and that she has her own reasons for heading to the island. Your dark adventure starts in an epic way, with your plane being shot down and both of the characters parachuting down to the island, separating at the very beginning of the game. If you like scary and puzzles-filled horrors, the new Nightmare should land on top of the list of your games to replay, as other than the graphics, it's still a solid title to dive into. Magic and Mayhem: The Art of Magic, aka Magic Mayhem 2, is actually a prequel to the first game that's conceptually and gameplay-wise near identical to it, still being an RTS with some limited RPG elements. It expanded on the presentation with new full 3D engine though, and introduced a new spellcrafting system known as Portmanteau. You're a young mage Aurax who's seeking his kidnapped sister, all the while confronting evil wizards to claim their powers and increase his own repertoire of spells. Not because he's greedy, but because he may need them to save her. Same as in the original, most of the 35 missions that the game is split into are about defeating opposing casters, which you naturally do with the use of magic. The gimmick being that you usually don't use it directly against them, but have to summon various creatures and monsters to fight for you. All spells cost mana, and to replenish it you have to capture and hold so-called mana wells, which will be nothing new to veterans of the previous title. The fight in each mission carries on until one of the spellcasters falls, either you or the enemy. Not all missions are combat-centric, however, and some of them are more story-focused, having you protect a particular character or sneaking in somewhere, for instance. There are just a few of these perhaps, but they're a nice change of pace and add a lot of flavor to the plot. The aforementioned Portmanteau, which I'm convinced I'm mispronouncing here terribly, and it's probably pronounced something like Portmanteau, Porcupine or whatever, allows you to create a completely new kinds of spells by placing reagents in different amulets, either good, neutral or evil. So you can always prepare for the challenges ahead by making those that you think will be most useful. When it comes to presentation, the Art of Magic is pretty sweet. I mean, not as sweet as waffles with maple syrup sweet, but definitely ice cream kind of sweet. Salty caramel, vanilla maybe, rum and raisins perhaps, sweet. The graphics are excellent for the time, and while not absolute top of the line, they are very colorful and fit well with the entire magical fantasy setting of the game. Same can be said about music and sound design. The creatures growl, grunt and make all manner of weird noises, the nature sounds, well, natural, and the magic spells swish, swoosh, dink and donk appropriately too. Overall, the clothing fit the model. Now, is the Art of Magic as good as the first Magic and Mayhem was? It's hard for me to tell really, as I'm not an avid RTS gamer, but I gave both a little of my time in the past and I think I remember the first one more fondly. What do you think of them though? Let me know in the comments below. Evil Dead movies are the most stupid, over-the-top and downright idiotic cinema ever. Only perhaps matched by the 79, 80 Sharknado movies or however many of these there were, and I love them all to bits. I mean, how can you not have fun watching Ash with that chainsaw hand of his running around covered in red? Well, let's call it paint here for the YouTube's sake, and annihilate countless practical effects made demonic-looking puppets. These movies are so bad that they're good, is what I'm saying here. Hail to the king, baby. Wrong game. Still, Evil Dead Hail to the King nails the atmosphere and the look of the movies and even features Bruce Campbell reprising his most famous role. Many known to the fans of the movie's locations, characters and even objects are in the game, so in a way it's like watching an Evil Dead movie, but one that you can actually influence the outcome of. Gameplay-wise, Hail to the King is similar to Resident Evil and Alone in the Dark, so it's kind of a horror, but with some humorous overtones and a bit of puzzling. These are usually not very demanding, so they shouldn't get in the way of all the action. The game, naturally for its subgenre, features pre-rendered backgrounds with 3D characters and objects moving around them, tank controls and annoying camera too. I mean, static camera, yes, static. I'm sorry, I somehow always default into calling it annoying when it's static. In this particular case though, it's surprisingly usually suspended in a pretty good location, so it's not too much of a bother. Staying faithful to its lore, Ash sports a chainsaw strapped to one of his arms and can carry different weapons with his other hand. The enemies are decently designed and interesting looking, making the game appear like a next entry in the movie's franchise, but the gameplay, Well, as far as I know, console versions of the game were pretty darn good, but the PC outing is not. I mean, it's not the worst game ever, it's just missing a mark on a lot of things. The graphics are a bit old looking for 2001, especially the textures that are as washed out as that favorite author of yours that long lost the talent and skill to publish books. The resolution cannot be bumped to anything over 640 by 480 for some unexplained reason, and the controls are just a nightmare on PC if you don't have a gamepad, utilizing what feels like the most annoying combination of keys on a keyboard ever, which I shit you not, cannot be remapped in any way. But, and it's crucial here, especially when talking about this game in particular, but if you fulfill any of the requirements that will follow, you may actually enjoy it. So if you're a die-hard fan of Evil Dead or survival horror games, if you have a gamepad and don't mind a bit ancient-looking low-poly presentation, then there's definitely something here to take a few hours of your time. And it's literally just a few, as Hail to the King is comically short, and can easily be completed in one evening. Conquest Frontier Wars is a rather intriguing sci-fi real-time strategy. Interestingly enough, it was made by the same folks that gave us pretty fun Starlancer and its amazing follow-up Freelancer 2. The game's background is built around the idea of humanity discovering wormholes, and they allow for interstellar travel over vast distances near instantly, ushering a new era of discovery and exploration. And while it all benefited us in numerous ways, we've also discovered mantis, a very aggressive insectoid race, and the mysterious beings known as Celerons. And when aggression and aggressive expansion meet the opposition, things are ready to explode. So, soon after important fleets of ships disappear on the other side of the wormhole, you are tasked with following and expanding of a human influence there, all the while figuring out what happened. Each of the three races have their own up and down sides and are entirely different from one another. Humans, so Terrans really, focus on warfare technology. Mantis are efficient with their resources, and Celerons have great ships and can create temporary wormholes. What's more, these three are apparently balanced perfectly, and playing with either of them is a viable choice and does not put you at a disadvantage. But why is it so important that I decided to mention it here? Cause naturally, Conquest is best enjoyed in multiplayer. I mean, I'm not sure if it can still be played online, as it's the Ubisoft that was the publisher, and they have a history of closing down of servers for their older games, but at that time it was the best way of experiencing the game. Unlike most other titles in the genre, Conquest Frontier Wars required you to control and manage supply lines, which added depth and made it feel more realistic, if I can even say that about the game set in deep space. What I can definitely say though, is that my experience with Conquest is very limited. I vaguely remember trying it out, so I probably gave it a very little attention back then, since I was more into other genres. So while I can see and appreciate its undoubtedly notable perks, I cannot recommend you play it. Try it out, check if it's something that you'll be into, and make up your own mind about it. Also sorry, but I'm not sorry. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a Batman or Spider-Man. I was torn between them, but both had something that I was into back then. One fought crime at night under the moonlight, and the other zoomed around over Manhattan, spitting light-hearted jokes left and right. As the time went by though, I graduated into X-Men and imagined myself having one of those cool powers and standing in guard of freedom and equality. Yes, I'm a silly potato, we've established that in the past already. But if I knew that the alien hunter job was also an option, well, then perhaps my life would have turned out differently. Oh, and to be clear, no, I'm neither Batman nor Spider-Man, and the only real mutation powers that I have are the ability to predict the past with near 100% accuracy, I call it memory, and I can also lift either a single cat or a medium-sized basket of apples over my head, with ease no less. So, yeah, I'm super. Zax from Zax the Alien Hunter, however, clearly knew exactly what he wanted to be. The Alien Hunter. Well, not really, he was a miner of sorts, but he became one eventually. The story tells us that he found a particularly ore-rich planet which he wanted to exploit to suck it dry, so to speak, out of its ore deposits and score big. Mainly in money, but along with it probably with luxurious and idle future lifestyle too. As he was landing on the planet, however, his ship was shut down, leaving him in a rather unpleasant predicament. Not only the planet was not abandoned, but also populated by a seemingly peaceful race of Korbos, which, meant that he couldn't literally steal all of their ore from under their noses, but also that his ship was broken and needed repairs. He also learned that the mechanical beasts scouring the planet were bent on cleansing it of Korbos. So, not to be a complete dick, Zack decided to help Korbos in their struggles. I mean, he still hoped on seeking parts to repair his ship and draining the ore veins left and right like a boss, but at least he was going to do it in the name of something good. Over the course of the game, however, slowly but gradually, he will change from a self-centered egoist into someone who genuinely cares about the oppressed core boss. Zax the Alien Hunter is a top-down sci-fi isometric action game, and action it does not lack in. What's more, it's really fun. The controls are similar to those in Crusader games, so you direct Zax's movement with a keyboard and the crosshair and shooting with a mouse, which would have usually taken a minute to get used to, but unlike Crusader, in Zax they're very fluid and feel natural. They kinda feel like twin stick controls but with no sticks, if that even makes sense. The enemies are varied and aplenty, so you'll face a lot of different robots, wild boars, bipedal Sasquatch-like creatures, and many others. I mean, there are literally thousands of them coming at you throughout Zax's entire adventure, and to solidify and highlight that fact, the game even shows you, when you complete it, how many thousands exactly you've downed along the way. As you do all that while having a lot of fun, I must add, you collect the aforementioned ore, which then can be used at Zax's ship to create better weapons, shields and batteries. There are quite a few of these, and they're all different and fun to use. Weapons, not the batteries. Some of the areas that you'll travel through will have you engage in a bit of environmental puzzling, so you know, pulling levers, seeking keys, simple stuff really, but it's not gonna be what you'll spend a lot of time on. Zax the Alien Hunter neither is, nor it ever was, the best looking and sounding title, but it's really enjoyable despite that, and that factor of it remained unchanged for the last 23 years, and I wholeheartedly recommend it. Shooters, strategies, horrors, whatever. 2001 was truly a stacked year, and with each episode we're rediscovering more. Some are great, some less so, all are worth remembering though. If you enjoyed the series and reminiscing about the oldies together, make sure to leave a like, subscribe and hit that bell to always be notified whenever I release something else than an occasional cringe joke.